Welcome to the deep dive. We're going to be looking at something pretty different today.
Huh.
Yeah, it's about politics and power,
Okay.
but kind of from an angle you don't always see.
Interesting.
So we're diving into this article. It's called Everyday Politics. And, it's not exactly your typical political analysis.
I can imagine.
Yeah, this deep dive, it's all about like unpacking this perspective.
Uh,
It's not really mainstream.
mhm.
And just seeing, what it's saying, the arguments and all.
Right.
And then also what kind of questions it makes us think about.
I think you'll find this one pretty interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so this article, it comes right out and says politics, it's not for everyone.
Hmm.
And get this, it says that individuals trying to, force their will on everyone, on the whole collective, that's a problem.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty bold, right? Like
Yeah.
it goes against so much of what we usually hear about democracy and individual rights and all that.
It really challenges how we think about things today.
For sure.
The author even says, individuals are ill-equipped to speak for, direct, or lead the whole nation, the collective.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's a pretty heavy statement. It almost sounds like they're rejecting the whole idea of democracy,
Yeah, it definitely pushes back against that idea that popular opinion, like what the majority wants, should be the main driver of politics.
Mm.
Actually, you know what the article seems to say? Like the ideal leader, it's not someone who comes from the people, it's someone who's separate from them, above them even.
Okay.
Yeah, and they even suggest that the best rulers are like divinely ordained monarchs or maybe a special class of, aristocrats.
It's like stepping back in time.
Right.
But you know what's interesting to me? We might think this whole divine ordained thing is like way outdated. But then look at how some leaders today, there's this whole cult of personality around them.
Yeah.
Like, could it be that deep down people actually want a leader who seems larger than life? Almost superhuman.
That's a really interesting connection. This idea, this desire for that kind of leader, it's been around forever. Think about the pharaohs in ancient Egypt
Oh, yeah.
or the emperors of Japan. They were seen as like this link between the gods and the people,
Right.
ruling because, well, a higher power said so. So this article, it's tapping into a very old idea, even if it's talking about modern politics.
Right, right. And here's where it gets even more complicated. The article says individuals shouldn't be too involved in politics, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it also says the individual is like a sovereign political entity with the right to, get this, oppose unjust rule. So on one hand, stay out of politics, but then resist tyranny. How do you even make sense of that?
It is a fascinating paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they give a very strong example to make the point. They talk about the right to oppose and even kill an unjust sovereign.
Wait, are they actually saying it's okay to, like, assassinate a leader if you think you're bad?
It is a powerful way to remind us about the power of the individual, even when they're told not to be too active in politics.
Mm.
We can look back in history, too.
Yeah.
Like, think about tyrannicide. That's the killing of a tyrant. And philosophers and revolutionaries have debated that for ages.
Mm-hmm.
It really makes you think about, where does the state's power end? And when can an individual act against injustice?
That's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I shouldn't try to shape politics, but I can resist tyranny, where's the line? When is it okay for me to take action?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And honestly, the article doesn't give a clear answer, but it does say something really interesting.
What's that?
It says we shouldn't trust people who are super into politics, especially those on the fringes.
The overly political, huh?
Yeah. The author seems to be saying that if someone is really aggressive about getting power, especially through extreme means, it might mean they're not fit to lead.
Okay, so we shouldn't trust the overly political. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking about all these figures throughout history who kind of fit that description. Do you think that's a fair way to judge someone?
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? It's subjective, right? Judging someone's ability to lead based on how ambitious they are.
Right.
But this article, it kind of implies that true leadership, it should come from wanting to serve, not wanting power.
I see, I see. So, okay, if we're not supposed to focus on politics, what are we supposed to do then? This article keeps mentioning self-perfection.
Yeah.
Like that's the key to changing society.
Uh-huh.
It's almost like they're giving a spiritual answer to a political question.
It's definitely a different way of looking at it. Instead of fighting it out in the political world, the author is saying the real battle is within us.
Hmm.
By becoming better people, more virtuous, wiser, we somehow make the whole nation better.
Okay, but how does that actually work? It sounds a little too idealistic, like just personal growth can fix these big systemic problems. It
Yeah.
can't be that simple, right? Like everyone meditate and poverty will disappear, that kind of thing.
You're right. That is a tension in the article. It's not clear how this individual focus turns into collective change.
Right.
They seem to be saying that if enough people reach this high level of morality, then the system will just transform on its own.
But isn't that just wishful thinking? I mean, what even is self-perfection? Who gets to decide that?
Right.
Is there some universal standard, or is it all just like your opinion?
Those are great questions, and the article doesn't give any hard answers.
Yeah.
It's more about giving us a new framework, a new way to think about what our responsibility is as individuals and how that connects to changing society.
This reminds me of libertarianism, actually.
Oh, yeah.
That whole philosophy about maximizing freedom and minimizing the government.
Right, right.
They even debate this among themselves, like how much individual freedom is too much? When does it start hurting everyone?
It's a tough balance, for sure. And this article, it leans really hard on the individual, almost like collective action doesn't matter as much.
So let me get this straight. The author is saying, don't try to change the system from the outside. Change yourself from the inside.
That's the basic idea.
Okay.
They even have this one line. It's powerful. They say we need to make ourselves worthy again to be ruled by a nobility.
Hold on. I need to process that for a second. It sounds like they want to go back to the old way of doing things, where the leader is chosen because of some quality they have, not because people like them.
Yeah.
Are they saying we have to become better so we deserve better leaders?
It's up for interpretation for sure.
Yeah.
But there's this definite feeling that they want a system where leaders are picked based on merit and virtue,
Okay.
maybe even some kind of divine right instead of through elections.
Interesting idea. Maybe a little out of touch, but here's what gets me. Maybe it is too easy to get caught up in the political drama
Yeah.
and forget that we all play a role in shaping our lives, our communities.
That's a good point. Even if we don't totally agree with the article, it makes us think about how our own actions and choices, they affect the world around us.
Maybe that's the real deep dive here. Not finding the perfect political system, but figuring out our values and what motivates us. Asking ourselves, how can I make a positive impact no matter who's in charge?
I like that. It's about focusing on the change within, not just the systems outside.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where real power comes from.
So it's like we're being challenged, right, to be the change. But instead of changing the world, it's about becoming the kind of people who, well, deserve to be led by a just, noble leader. But that raises a huge question for me.
Yeah.
What does that even mean? Like being worthy of that kind of leadership?
Good question. And the article seems to tie it to, like, aligning ourselves with some greater truth
Okay.
or a moral order.
Right.
It's almost like you have to be spiritually ready for good government.
And that's where the faith part comes in, right? The author is definitely saying we need to go back to traditional values, spiritual principles, as the basis for like renewing society.
Definitely.
It's a perspective that, a lot of conservatives and traditionalists would agree with.
Absolutely. There's this feeling that we've lost our way morally. Like modern society is adrift. We've strayed from those timeless truths that, guided humanity for so long.
Yeah, I can see the appeal of that idea, especially now when things feel so chaotic and uncertain. But it makes me wonder who gets to decide what those timeless truths are. What about people who aren't religious? Doesn't this kind of thinking lead to excluding people? Intolerance.
That's a fair point. Definitely something to be careful of. Whenever someone says they have the only online truth,
Right.
especially when you're talking about beliefs that are different from your own, you need to be open and respectful, have a real conversation.
Okay. Even if we forget about religion for a second, I'm still fascinated by this idea that if we change ourselves, we change society.
It is powerful.
It doesn't even matter if you see it in a spiritual way or not.
I agree. And it crosses cultures, philosophies. It's a universal thing
Yeah.
that we all have a responsibility to be good people and help our community.
So maybe the takeaway here isn't to ditch politics entirely. Maybe it's about finding that balance, engaging with the systems we have, but also working on ourselves.
Yeah, it's not either. We can push for better policies and try to be better people.
Right.
Hold our leaders accountable and hold ourselves to a higher standard.
It's not about picking one or the other. It's about doing both at the same time. Maybe that's how we build a society that's both fair and good.
And maybe, in that process, we figure out what true power really is.
What do you mean?
Not something you grab or force on others, but something that comes from inside each of us.
I like that. Okay, I'm going to leave our listeners with one last thought. If politics isn't the main way to change things, if it really comes down to U.S. changing, how does that change how we live our everyday lives? How do we build that character and wisdom that actually makes a difference? That's something for all of us to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.